this computer. Coffee, cheers, and welcome to Classic Movie Salon. Today we are talking about The African Queen, which I believe can be watched on Netflix. Welcome, as always, the Classic Movie Salon crew. It's Colleen, it's Tachi, it's Matthew. We're all here, and we're on Facebook, I think, at least for a second. So who has not, or when was the last time? I haven't seen African Queen in, years and years. But it's a great movie. I always thought it was great. And I'm really glad I watched it again because there were definitely a couple of things I forgot or a couple of things I paid more attention to. Tachi, when was your first round with The African Queen?
19 something
19? Back in the...
Yeah.
I don't,
back in the last century.
I don't even remember that century at all. This century is way more interesting. No, I'm kidding.
It really is, unfortunately.
So the last time you saw it was last century?
Yeah, that was like the first and last time that I saw it. Probably, again, film during class or whatever, I think, was the last time. So that 1990 something.
Very cool. And Colleen, when was the last time you took the ride?
I have this one in my permanent collection of DVDs, so it's all the time, and TCM airs it, so I jump on The African Queen anytime it's floating down, you know. Yeah. I do. No gin for me, but you know, no gin.
How about rum?
A little bit. But no leeches.
I thought Colleen was going to go sober down The African Queen, and then suddenly it got a little more of a party atmosphere. Matthew Ward, when was the last time you went down the ride on The African Queen?
Okay. Well, I was just thinking this movie was made 66 years ago.
Wow.
I first saw it more than 40 years ago, so it was still kind of a new movie when I saw it back in 1970-something for the first time, and just like the rest of you, it's a movie I keep coming back to, and I probably watch it every year. Never get bored of it. There's such a magnificent movie, headed up by these two great performances. So, a movie I've loved all my life, and a movie I'll watch every year until the day I die. Hopefully, not by being torpedoed or by catching malaria.
Yes. And there is, for anybody interested, if you just go on YouTube, search for Making of African Queen, you will find almost hour-long documentary that is put together with file footage. I don't know where it came from, but it's really good and has some interesting tidbits that include the fact that Sam Spiegel, the producer, apparently he went to John Huston and said, hey, what do you want to make? John Huston apparently wanted to shoot an elephant, and so he wanted to make this movie where he could shoot an elephant while he's on location, and so he agreed to The African.
Wait, you mean shoot one with a gun?
Yeah. Shoot, kill. Yeah, John Huston. Yeah, exactly. And that was something.
It was a game
Hepburn,
hunter.
big time. Yeah, and apparently the first location they had, the first location was not going to be friendly to his goal of killing an elephant. So they went to another location, and that happened after everybody had already landed.
I didn't see that in my reading. I would have got real sad and maybe not bought the movie. Okay, well.
So as the...
And that was a central thing of the White Hunter, Black Heart.
Exactly.
Movie with Clint, which is about the making of this movie, and that told the story of his obsession with killing elephants.
Yeah.
And having been amongst herds of elephants in Africa myself, I can confidently say that it takes a man with an enormously small thingy to want to shoot an elephant.
And Katharine Hepburn apparently completely agreed with that and gave John Huston a lot of guff for it. And as the story goes on, again, this little documentary thing on YouTube, John Huston invited Katharine Hepburn to go hunting, and just so she would understand from his point of view what hunting is like. And she thought it was ridiculous, and she thought it was against his character. And apparently they were out there looking for elephants, and suddenly there was the sound of 15 or 20 of them, and they were coming their way, and they were stampeding, and they had to run away. And John Huston actually almost killed the leading lady in the African Queen by taking her hunting. So he didn't get his elephant on this movie. Whether he got it at another point, that I don't know. But definitely worth checking.
And risk losing their insurance coverage.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's extremely reckless.
Yeah, totally reckless, and the way, but it's it's Hollywood. Sam Spiegel, the producer of this, so he gets John Huston. Then he goes to Humphrey Bogart and he says, "I'm making the African Queen with John Huston. Do you want to be in it?" He says, "Yes." And then he says to Humphrey Bogart, "Who would you like to work with?" And he said, "I've never worked with Katharine Hepburn." So he goes to Katharine Hepburn and says, "I have Humphrey Bogart and John Huston making this movie. And Bogart wants to work with you." And she was like, "Okay." And he had none of the money. Nothing was in place other than like classic Hollywood BS to get a movie set up. But they did it.
And then, according to the independent little thing on YouTube, this was an indie film.
Yes.
So, I don't think I recall that when I was watching it, the first time I watched it. I thought this was still like, really not necessarily a big studio picture, but, I didn't know it was an indie film.
Yeah, I think that was his Horizon Films or whatever it's called. It's Sam Spiegel's small company. It wasn't through.
There's a few companies involved in this one.
Yeah,
and I guess this is 51, so this is also the beginning of the end of the studio system. So back to the movie. Okay. So the movie is set, and Matthew, I want to bounce this off you. So the movie's made in 1951, but it is set during World War II.
One.
Right at the start of World War One.
Okay. Now, so Matthew, can you set us up on what the world? Where is the world in terms of Germany, the UK, Canada, and Africa at that point in history in the real world?
Okay, so 3 years ago, World War One began in 1914. It started in Europe. Everyone knew the war was coming because of the commercial rivalry between the great powers. And the theory had been that the balance of powers of the great powers would hold, just like nuclear deterrence has held since World War II. Nobody thought anyone would be stupid enough to start the war. But at the same time, everyone knew that a war was imminent because Germany especially was being very aggressive. The colonial powers in Africa had agreed amongst themselves, a gentleman's agreement of white men, to say, well, if there is a war in Europe, we shall keep out of it because we don't want the natives getting uppity. If we start fighting one another, the natives will get uppity and they'll throw us out. So the colonial powers, which were primarily Britain, France, Belgium, but also, interestingly, Germany made this agreement. Germany didn't have much of a world empire compared to Britain and France, but it did have these interesting little pockets in Africa. Togo in West Africa, Namibia in Southwest Africa, and a large part of Tanzania in East Africa. Although the First World War began with the shooting of an ostrich called Archie in Sarajevo, the first military action of the First World War started in Togo, and the first shot was fired by a Nigerian soldier in Togo when Nigerian and Ghanaian soldiers invaded Togo and took over that German colony. In Namibia in Southwest Africa, Germans tried to invade South Africa but were repulsed, and then a counter-invasion sorted that out. But in East Africa, there was a war, part of the First World War, that went on from the first day to the last day of the World War One. It was the longest battle of World War One, and yet it's the one that nobody's heard of. And the African Queen tells part of the story of the war in East Africa, 1914 to 1918. And the part of the story is the control of the Great Lakes. Because in East Africa, you have these Great Lakes, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Victoria. They actually have proper local names, but of course in Europe, people only know them by colonial names. And Germany had controlled those lakes in Lake Tanganyika by having armed cruisers on them. There weren't military cruisers; these were just commercial vessels, which had been had guns stuck on them to control the lakes. By controlling the lakes, they controlled the land around it. Now, this movie was an extraordinary undertaking. If you're going to make a movie about stuff going on in the African lakes in 1951, anyone with a brain would say, let's go and shoot it in Louisiana or Florida. And you could shoot it for about $30 and you could be home in time for dinner. But instead, they made the crazy decision, for the reason you've explained, of going to shoot it in Congo. And that involves shipping loads of stuff across to Congo, which was a tremendous undertaking. But it's not as tremendous as the undertaking that the Germans had done to get that ship into that lake just before World War I. They built it in Germany. They then took it to pieces, like Lego, put it in cargo ships, shipped it to East Africa, put the boxes on trains, got the trains over to the lake, put the ship back together again and stuck it on the lake. That's an amazing thing, to send a ship by post. Imagine that. And then ultimately then it dominated the lake from 1914 to 1916. Britain then did a naval action where they shipped some smaller boats over to the lake and they're able to take on the Germans. So the African Queen is a fictional story about people involved in a real event. And what's quite extraordinary is that the ship that the German cruiser is based on is still in active service on the lake today, shuttling people up and down for their shopping. And the African Queen, the little cruiser, which was a real little boat which used to work up and down the rivers and lakes of East Africa and was used for the film, that is still in existence, was recently restored, and is now in a museum in Florida, of all places.
Wow.
So Bogey and Catherine Hepburn may be in the great Hollywood Boulevard and the Stars, but the African Queen herself and the ship that she fictionally attacked in the movie are still with us. And it's the most extraordinary piece of history, this 4-year running battle along the jungles and lakes of East Africa, and the most extraordinary movie that was made about it.
Wow.
And also a movie, this was based on a C.S. Forester book, and the novel had a different ending. Also, if you're watching this, you've never seen The African Queen, just stop now. Go watch it, come back. It's on Netflix. You can find it. It's out there. What was interesting is, well, a couple of interesting things, again, that came from the documentary, the making of thing, is that the script was, Sam Spiegel got the rights to the book, got James Agee and John Huston were working on it together, and John Huston, again, in that documentary, explained their schedule, which was sort of like write for a couple of hours, have lunch, take a couple hours off, write for a couple of hours, go play tennis, eat dinner, write for a couple of hours, go to sleep. And not that rough. And they were sort of trading off on it. And Huston said that he was amazed at how fast James Agee was writing. And it came to find out that James Agee wasn't sleeping. He was writing all the time and got really sick and couldn't finish the script. And later died not too long after working on this movie. I guess he was really psyched about it and wanted to make this deadline that they were trying to make. So sad part of that. And look up James Agee. He wrote and worked with Walker Evans on a book called We All Now Praise Famous Men, which is sort of an odd kind of documentary book and crossing the lines between where a documentarian is sort of part of the story versus documenting it. So the script that they went to Africa with they didn't finish the ending. They didn't have the ending. They didn't know they were going to stick with the book. But apparently as time went on, John Huston was seeing Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn and these characters and was like, they have to live. They have to. And if you look at the setup of this movie, we sort of like, boom, we're in the village. We see the setup with her and her brother. And that is, some of that is shot in Africa and some of that is shot in the UK. Apparently they were all really sick from drinking water that was not filtered on the boat. And so Katharine Hepburn, in the scene where she's playing the organ and sweating and looking like hell, she had a bucket right next to her, and she was throwing up in between takes. And if you match it, because they split the screen, if you match it with her other takes, you can see that she had gained some weight back from not being sick. So just a little bit, like her cheekbones are just a little more sunken in. But it's one of those movies that the story of them making it and how what is the typing? And Lauren Bacall. Oh, sorry. And Lauren Bacall was on set the whole time because her and Humphrey Bogart were married at that time, and she was never on screen. She had nothing to do with the movie. She just kind of like hung out and cooked and helped people who were getting sick, which was happening left and right because they were in Africa. So, and they were also, I think the other part of this is both Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, by movie standards, look like crap. Like they're
you can't look pretty in the jungle. I mean, that would have kind of the authenticity. Yeah, I mean, but that lent to the realism of the film, and they're at a certain age, shall we say, also.
Yeah, you know, they kept pressing upon the fact of who wants to go. They didn't think anybody would want to go and see two old people. I'm like, they're not old, by Hollywood standards, yes. But I'm like, old. But then when you look at the way that they look, haggard and raggedy, but it adds, like you said, to the realism, because we've seen other films that take place in a quote unquote jungle or in the tropics, and they look fresh as a damn daisy. Maybe just a little bit of dirt here, but I was like, wow, the two of you look terrible. That's Oscar award winning look right there.
Yeah, you believe it. It's green around the gills. Poor Catherine. All of them. I mean, well, they said Bogey. I think they said, well, wasn't he the only one that didn't get sick, and it was because, or Houston and Bogey, because they were pickled. The blood was pickled with booze.
Exactly.
So,
all the men who were hard drinking didn't get sick because they weren't drinking any of the water.
Right. So that they said a fly would bite them and keel over, from the alcohol oozing out of their skin, apparently. So, And
also the fact they're heavy smokers as well would keep the mosquitoes away.
Yes, smoke is a great deterrent for.
So a bad lifestyle in that sense was exceedingly helpful, apparently.
Vices were helpful in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. Katharine Hepburn's on some talk show in this documentary talking about how she was sick and they were all fine because she was drinking water and was sober as a church mouse, and
that darn clean living.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that's really interesting about this movie is that it is a story that has a few things going on it, and it's set up very quickly. The first thing you know is these two are total opposites. That doesn't take long to put together, but also that once her brother has been killed or dies as a result of everything, he dies. Oh no, they hit him.
No, he dies is because of the beating. That's the whole
right.
That's what sets up the story. Yeah.
Right. So
the war starts. The Germans attack the village. He gets beaten by a soldier and dies as a result of those injuries, and that sends her off on the voyage of vengeance.
She has to leave, and she can't remain there alone in the villages. Yeah, so he has to get her out.
And she's been there for a decade.
Yeah.
The life of a spinster.
Initially, anyway. I wanted to really quickly talk about this whole thing. So basically, it's called African Queen, and there's you really don't get the sense of Africa that much at all, because it's not really about the villagers. It's not really about the place. It's more about the story of Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn. That's what it's about. But I know when I say again.
I don't think she was in the movie. I don't think she was in the movie.
Sorry, not Audrey. Katharine Hepburn. One of them damn Hepburns, anyway. So yeah, it was
River of
only you, Matthew. So it was more so about them. But I remember when I first saw this, I was like, oh gosh, here we go, another movie with Africans and colonial. You know, that's the thing, but you lose that sense of it, except at the very beginning
Yeah.
when there's, of course, you always have to slash and burn the village. That's the only way to do things, to come in and slash and burn a village. And but the gorgeous opening shot of the river and the tree, that's something that you don't really see very often in film at that time, at least not that I've seen. There's usually there's some sort of montage, but it's not that serene. And if you look at it, that could be Apocalypse Now. We've seen scenes like that. That could be anything that happens now. It's very, and in fact, when I was at NAB in the VR dome, there was that same shot, not the same shot, but that same setup of going through the trees and looking in VR. So that's something, that cinematic technique feels fresh because it's always done and improved upon, and then the technology gets newer up until the point that we now have VR. So that was interesting to me.
I agree.
Funny you should mention Apocalypse Now, because this movie was filmed on the real location in East Africa, even though scientists says they shouldn't have. You get Apocalypse Now, which was made, 15 years or so later?
Right.
That was filmed about 20 miles in that direction from me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was filmed here, 20 miles in that direction.
Incredible.
And yet, by then, they could have filmed in, say, Thailand, but they didn't. They filmed it in Essex and Cambridgeshire.
But also another great point you bring up, Tachi, though, the story becomes so much about just, Bogey and Catherine, where you forget even that it, until really the very end, when they're fashioning their torpedoes and end up on the German warship, that it's even a war picture. It's just a couple. You forget the location, that they're in Africa, that they have this jungle to contend with when they get stuck in the mud banks and they're waiting for the rain they don't even know if they're going to get out. All this things to contend with. It's so wonderfully, the story's so wonderfully knit together that so it's great for thanks for
It's set up really. It's also set up really fast because again, you go right from village burning. He comes back. He also had some problems with the Germans. She's going to get on the boat. She is prim and proper. He is drunky drunk, and these two are not going to get along at all. We watch. So that's one story that happens. The other story is immediately when she hears about this ship and that he could make a torpedo. Like that's what they're going to do. And so then you have that story on top of yet the other story. And then it becomes their relationship for the biggest chunk of it. And also it's a comedy. And the part where sort of it's not romantic comedy in terms of the hard, big capital C comedy, but there's some funny things that happen because they're opposites. And then when they're together, that continues to be funny. But throughout, there's this mission that this couple is going to sink a ship. Like, it's just so, there's so much on this. And the idea that in the book, they don't make it. They sink. That's it. End of scene.
But you got to have the Hollywood happy endings. It doesn't sell tickets.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, the book ending was not that different. It had them going down, making the torpedoes, going down into the lake, a storm coming in and sinking, just as it did in the movie. They then went on to land and they went off into freedom on the British side of the lake, so they were fine. And C.S. Forrester, when he wrote the book, tried to fit this fictional story within the historical truth. And so he had the British military forces taking on the German ship instead of the African Queen. So, yes, the movie makers deviated from history a little bit. But, for once, I'll forgive them because it was made for a much better movie and a much better ending.
I completely agree. Yeah. And how kind of... No, go ahead.
The first time I saw it, though, I had a little trouble, I admit, with the torpedo thing. It was a tough sell. It was a tough sell for me. It really was. But I reconciled with it. It was just the drama and the turnaround. Especially Bogey. Not only submitting, he submits in a way to Hepburn, and he ends up submitting to his own boat. So it's two women he caves to, in the movie ultimately. But I was kind of like really a couple of nails, a tube. They stick it out the boat. It's a wood boat. I don't know, but it's sort of in the end, you have to.
No, that bit's true. That bit would work. C.S. Forrester.
Oh, I know.
Knew his stuff. He wrote Hornblower. He and loads of other naval stuff. He researched all very well. The technology in that, not just the design of the African Queen depicted in the book, not just the film, and the torpedoes depicted in the book, were all real and workable. It was a viable proposition.
Oh, the principles, the metal, the contact, the physics of it makes sense. I think
it's more that the drunk guy and the gal who's been in a little village for 10 years
coming up with it. Yeah.
Not only coming up with it, but to like, that's who's going to pull this off. That is the.
But you know what? It's the essence of survival. When you are truly in a situation where it's live, get busy living, get busy dying, and go back to Reddit Shawshank, and you have to come up with something. Your mind and body go to extraordinary places, and you start to get very creative and resourceful and imaginative, and you do what you have to do.
But there's loads of examples in real history. I'm just thinking of the Falklands War, which was happening right now in 1982, in April 1982. The British forces landed, but they were short of supplies because their main supply ship had been bombed and sunk in the Atlantic. So they had next to no helicopters or armoured vehicles. So they had to get all this stuff across the island. And the islanders volunteered and used their own vehicles. But they had to get through the minefields. And to get through the minefields, they were taken through the minefields by a Falkland Islander, a woman on foot, walked through the minefield ahead of the British Army, guiding them by wearing white gloves on her hands and signalling in the darkness, left or right with the white gloves.
Wow.
She led the attack on the Falklands.
Wow.
Civilian woman.
Wow.
That's in 1982. It's not that long ago.
She get a damehood out of it?
I forget. She didn't get a damehood. She well deserved one, but she did get some kind of medal. I forget what it was. CBE or something.
CBE,
yeah.
Wow.
And there are other examples on the Falklands. The vet led the resistance. There was a resistance movement, and he was using his degouliing irons that you'd use for chopping the knackers off things. He was using those for chopping the Argentinian communication wires. So we'd go out on a vet call, and there's a wire.
You just rise to the occasion. You do what you have to do.
And in terms of, and the other thing, the third bit of the Falklands story that was like the African Queen, there's been very few occasions in history where infantry have taken on a ship and won. There was one in the English Civil War in 1643 in Cornwall, but one of the few others was in the Falklands, where 12 Royal Marines defended South Georgia against attack by the Argentinians, and they fought off an attack by an Argentinian Navy ship and knocked a hole in it using a bazooka. And off it went, and they beat it.
These are ground soldiers?
Colleen says. Yeah,
ground
Royal Marines just on the ground. Yeah.
Went on to a Navy and took on a Navy boat and did it.
No, they didn't board it. What they did was the Navy ship steamed into the Sound, was shooting at them. And they were armed with just their rifles, one light machine gun, one medium machine gun, and a bazooka.
Wow.
And they managed to drive off that ship using the determination that you mentioned. So
yeah.
I don't think there's anything implausible about the story at all. This is the kind of things that people would do.
You do. Yeah.
And I'm not saying implausible. I'm just saying in terms of it all happening at one time, it definitely ups the ante because, and also I guess Houston notes it in this documentary on YouTube that he giving directions to Katharine Hepburn that she pretty much opens the movie. I guess a few days into it, he was looking at what she's doing, and she's playing the prim and proper, and sort of is not happy with his existence and his life and his anything about him. And Houston's like, these two have to get together. So this is going to have to warm up a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to have a very odd turn. And there's also a story about she was supposed to have a personal bathroom that was in her contract no matter what.
Yeah.
So they had a boat, like a little flotation just with a tent with her bathroom in it. And it got caught in the caravan, and they had to cut it off and let it go. And then somebody had to explain to Katharine Hepburn that her bathroom's gone.
But I read too that she quickly got over her vanity because she was supposed to have a full-length mirror, and they were like, "You want it? You've got to carry it." And it cracked. It's something it broke in halfway, and she carried it. She wanted to see herself, her wardrobe. And I think she got over the vanity. When you're heaving into a bucket, pretty much that's going to go out the window too. I mean,
yeah. Developed world problems. Hashtag developed world problems.
Yeah, you're in the hashtag you're in the Congo. Deal with it. So
You know what I kept noticing in the documentary on YouTube about the making of it, how they tried to keep framing Africa. I remember the reporter kept asking both of them, both Hepburn and Bogart, so you're going into deep, dark Africa. I'm like, look, at this time, how do you feel about it? It was just ridiculous because at this time, it was still colonial, so
right.
deep and dark. And so I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because there are loads of Europeans that live in all of these countries. It wasn't until the 60s that they started gaining their independence from these European powers for the most part. And so, the way it's interesting to hear, just look at that, the way they frame Africa as this place that doesn't make any sense, that's dark and backwards and undeveloped. But if you want to make a big thing out of it, the Europeans came and developed it for themselves. And
and this is 1951.
1951.
6 years after 30 million or more Europeans had killed each other.
Exactly. So it's interesting to hear that. It's also a very American thing because the reporter was American. So it may have been a different case altogether if it was somebody from Europe, like a British journalist or whatever, asking these questions. But I'm like, you have no clue, do you?
But I'm also wondering how much of that was just popular culture, because that, deep, darkest Africa was sort of like, homemade cookies made by some giant factory you buy in a supermarket. It became like a marketing thing. And
also from I was going to say, for marketing, it builds up the hype of the movie,
right.
What the stars did, and they endured all the drama.
Wow, you could, you know what, Joe? You talking about this giant thing of cookies, it made me put the two together. Deep dark Africa cookies.
So now you want chocolate chip?
I want chocolate chip cookies. Thank you.
As do I. You're welcome. And
we had to start talking about cookies.
Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Oh,
and how we got
I'm running straight out after this to get some.
I had a bucket of cookies at the meeting earlier, and I gave them away. I was like, get them, go, take them.
Smart. That is smart.
Yeah,
absolutely, because that bucket of cookies would have been dinner. So.
Well, I guess why I gave them. I'm like, please take these. Exactly. I brought them, and I didn't take them home. So.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Danger. Thank you. I'm proud. Oh yeah.
I don't want cookies. I just want pounded yam and tilapia.
Wow, that's a very developed taste. That sounds good too, though. Maybe pounded yam and tilapia for dinner, and then I'll have cookies for dessert.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Somebody could grab a bottle of scotch. I think we're covered. I think we're good. The other thing with the story that once they because we're not going to explain the whole movie. Go watch the whole movie. And also, if you want a billion behind the scenes thing, I don't know if there's, because Katharine Hepburn wrote a book about making it. So a couple of things. All the stuff of them in the water, that was shot in the UK because the water in Africa was poisonous. Just
when their bodies were in the water.
Yeah,
Right.
any time they were touching water, anytime. The rest of the time they were on boats. And they also had sort of a flotation convoy where they had cut the boat in half. So they had one half of the boat at one end, one half at the other end, and could light it and lock a camera down, which in the actual boat is impossible because it's tiny.
Right.
And also they shot in Technicolor. Those cameras are huge, and
Yes.
they're running three different films, all running at the same time to get all that color. And which is why some of the green screen stuff looks weird when they're in the boat.
It does.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
You could see a definite halos around them all the way around, like they were cut out. Like when you were little and you used to cut paper dolls and then paste them in a scene. That's exactly what it looked like.
Oh,
Yeah.
and the glue oozed out behind.
Yeah.
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 I know that happened. That happened to you, Joe and Matthew, didn't it? With your
I
paper
know, right?
dolls.
You used to cut paper
Yeah.
dolls.
Yeah.
All the time. I use that analogy almost daily because it translates.
Until they came out with the kind that had tabs, and then you could tuck your tabs in.
Matthew's got the stuff right there.
There you go. Yeah.
So there you can see the raft with a boat on it.
Oh yeah.
It's very ambitious though, and this just goes to prove they're not in the deep, dark reaches of Africa. If you can you're bringing all that and setting it up on a river in Africa. You're not in some kind of far off remote.
Right, but
They managed to get there.
But
They got there.
But you're also not.
Well, there's a railway, for goodness' sake.
Right.
Get on the train.
But the crocodiles are real. On the back lot, they are not.
There's crocodiles.
So the shot
everywhere.
where you just see crocodile after crocodile pouring over, that's them. That's the shot
real.
they got. That's real.
That's B real. That's B-roll.
No, that's shot off the boat. So with Bogey in it, look at the shot. So when you have that in play, even in a controlled situation, CGI tiger, actual tiger, change the performance, actual tiger. So when you have real crocodiles really jumping off the boat that you're really shooting on, and they're right there and you really see them and you can feel them, they're 12 feet long, that affects your performance. These performances would not have happened on a backlot. And they shot it first. So then they could at least take that experience of being in Africa, remembering all of that, and now you're on a backlot. Now you're in a controlled situation, and you have to wade through water when all those sequences when they're dragging the boat. That's all backlot, and that's a smarter way to do it. And technically, even going to Africa at all is kind of nuts. You get everybody sick.
Yeah.
Everything about it makes it more expensive and harder.
It does, but here's the thing. There are millions of people that live there and they're just fine. It's how you deal with it. So my thing is like, did nobody have the bright idea to boil the water? My father lived there forever. The whole thing is he had a filter, but yeah, if you boil it, at the very least you won't get sick. You can't just dip your cup in the ocean, in the water.
Yeah, but they'll make the usual mistake of boiling the water, but they'll have ice in their drinks.
Right.
Yeah.
But there had to have been purification tablets.
Right. From what I understand, there was a filtration system that was set up on one of the boats that they were living on and drinking. And when that filtration system broke, they didn't know it. So they were drinking like they just dunked it into the water. So there was a system in place. They just didn't know it was broken until everyone was sick. Everyone who drank water.
You still have to boil the water. You still have to boil the water. Even with filtration, like my dad had a on a countertop filtration system with a very strong charcoal filter.
Mhm.
What you have to do is you boil it first, then you let it cool, then you let it filter through. So even if something goes wrong, at least the water is boiled. So for that, I blame them completely.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
You should have had just had tea. If they just lived on tea, they'd have been fine.
That's true.
yeah, I mean,
See, if they were English, if
Exactly.
all of them were English, they would have been fine.
hey, look, Mogambo went in 1956, I think it is, or 55, and they did also in the Belgium. I think it was also in the Congo or Uganda, because they went and they filmed gorillas also, and so and there's been other films and stuff set up, and oh my goodness, the gallery just changed. I'm sorry. I got distracted. But, locations everywhere. Well, when you have a location go wrong, even in the United States, in Canada, anything could happen anywhere. But I somehow it's an independent film, and they got it done there without big Hollywood money. I don't know. I think the marketing hype was the deep, dark Congo kind of sound.
I agree.
Yeah, that was part of it, and also from that documentary, when it got back to people like distributors, they didn't like what it looked like.
What do you mean?
They thought Humphrey Bogart and Kate Hepburn looked like crap. that they didn't look like what
glamorous
people would pay money to see, and they were totally wrong, of course, because we're still talking about it. But
exactly, yeah. Oh, that's funny. Well,
I think it also includes an air of bravery on their parts, because Hollywood is still very visual. At that time especially, you're talking about, even though we're going towards the end of the huge, big studio system, we're still talking about looks mattering hugely, bigly, and it's,
but that's funny, because you know what, the look of the movie did matter. Authentic, that it looked real, that it looked believable. I mean, isn't that what made this movie great? It worked. It looked like someone was real. They were really there. It did really work. They looked like they struggled. It was believable. I'm sorry, Tachi, I cut you off.
No, you're right. I think that's absolutely what made it work. But I'm just saying we're coming from this age of Hollywood still being glamorous.
Mm-hmm.
And to, even when you're in a struggle situation, you can think of umpteenth movies that where it was a struggling situation. People were fighting, people were in a war, but they still, look at some of these wartime movies. They still didn't look as if they were in a war, embattled. They looked like they just got a little bit of dust put on them in makeup. This looked like they lived under the reeds on that river. That's exactly what it looked like. It's interesting, because what if that had been too real for audiences? We're like, oh damn, we really don't want to see our icons looking like this. What if that had been too real?
Maybe that's why it works with Scarlett.
Yeah, compared with Spartacus, yeah, exactly. And Spartacus made at a similar time period. They all look just like they've stepped out of a Hollywood salon, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe that's why it works when Scarlett gets dresses, a dress made out of curtains and Gone with the Wind. I mean, she still has to, still looks glamorous, still looks pretty, and then Carol Burnett did the.
Still looked glamorous, still looked pretty.
Still looks glamorous with the, so. I don't know. It just
everybody knows that the sure way to make a movie successful is to have characters dressed in curtains.
Always
of
works.
Course, the Sound of Music.
It just keep on going. Yeah,
I got to write a story with more curtains in it. So the other thing that I loved about at least the way they treated the ending, since they had everything, as Matthew said in the book, up to the boat sinking. So everything after that was in the movie was what was written in the screenplay. What does Matthew have there? Oh, that's another shot of
What is that?
That's just the front of the boat.
Yeah, so you can see the great big rig. I mean, that will be in the Pinewood, in the big tank there.
Mm-hmm.
But it just shows the big rig that they had to build.
Mm.
And also that camera is like 4 by 5 feet, and that had to be lugged.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
You need a bigger boat.
Yeah, lug
Yeah.
to Africa, because to have all of that stuff and be where, it's not like you can go around the corner and get a part to fix something. It's a little more complicated than
True that. Yeah, true that.
And the film stock, I mean, I'm sure the film stock will be temperature sensitive as well. How the heck they're contented with that, I don't know.
Good point.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking, to be able to maintain that, the film stock plus the camera, without it molding or getting. I'm sure they had to be very careful. Just having been there, one false move and everything like rusts out. So that's interesting that they were able to maintain.
Mm.
So that's
What is
The
this
actually
shot
now?
on
was really
location.
Yeah, so that shows the size of the raft that they were using. So that's the wide shot of the image I showed earlier.
That kind of looks like a docking system.
Yeah, so I thought when they said raft, it was just a sort of 12 foot by 12 foot, but it was huge.
It's like a flotilla.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was flotilla.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Goodness gracious.
In fact, I think that's what they said.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
and the idea, like Tachi, what you're saying, and regardless of temperature and everything, just to get film in and out of a location, and then it's ×3 because of
Right.
Technicolor. So you have, so it's not like you just have one reel that runs. You have essentially 3 that are running simultaneously. So you have 3 times as more chance of screwing up, something going wrong, something ripping, something tearing, a sprocket not hitting, whatever. And under those circumstances, and to pull that off, when
and where were they getting it processed? Are they getting it processed locally, or
no, they have those. I'm
shipping
guessing
it to LA?
shipping it back to England. I'm guessing.
Excuse me, England. Yes.
I'm guessing.
Thank you.
Right. At that time, they didn't have film processing outfits, for not large ones anyway, in many places in Africa. Although you had African filmmakers, but
not in Technicolor. No one shooting it.
not at
I'm
all.
guessing.
Not at all.
I'm guessing they probably used the flying boat system, because by then the flying boats were being established to link London to Cape Town. After World War II, they established an air route, which was down across Europe, across the Mediterranean to Alexandria, then down the African Rift Valley using flying boats, so along the Nile, and then these lakes eventually to Cape Town.
Wow.
So I think with the flying boats, you could have got the film back to London within 24 hours, no problem.
That's still super expensive.
Oh yeah,
for an
everything about it is expensive. Like there's nothing, and again, for an indie movie to put this all together and to add all of these obstacles, there's a bunch of things I've written that I will never shoot because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to figure that out. There's no way. It's too much money. It's like, no way. I'm not going to touch it. It's going to take too much of my life to figure out how to shoot this one sequence.
Oh, for goodness sake, Joe, all you need, this is a garden shed and a bit of curtain. And with that, you can film anything, outer space, whatever you like.
That is true.
You just haven't figured it out yet.
I just don't want
to. Do the Plan 9 salute.
Yeah. And again, like looking at Plan 9, which was made in what year? It was after this.
Was it 1960? Yeah. Sadly.
Yeah, sadly. For them to mix, so anytime you saw, not anytime, but during any of the times when they were battling water and water's coming over the side and all that, that's all on a set. That's all on a soundstage. So when you have that happening, and then you have them cutting in between what they shot in Africa and what they shot in that backlot, and then to have all of that match and to do it in Technicolor and to hit all the continuity marks for all of that and not have it stick out is, unless you split screen, which again they did in this documentary a couple of times.
Well, you know what, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. This thing's a miracle they pulled this thing off.
Yeah.
Well, which is why when you bring up Plan 9 again, that's why I'm sorry. He just has no bloody excuse. If this crew can bring a 17 million pound camera, several different rolls of film stock, a water filtration system, and whatever the hell else they brought to Africa, and again, let's be more specific. They were where? Where they were in not Nairobi, but
I think that's where
I
they
forgot
started.
exactly where. I think they started in Nairobi, and then I remember them talking something about
Kenya.
Zimbabwe, which they called Rhodesia at that time.
They were in Kenya a little bit too?
Right, Nairobi.
Oh, okay. Oh, Nairobi's, yes, thank you.
Right.
Yes, it's
so
Uganda and the Congo.
Uganda.
Okay, Uganda and the Congo. Okay, so I there's no excuse if they can do all of this, and you spend, I don't know what the budget was comparatively, for both films. That's just inexcusable, and that is damn laziness. Damn laziness, and this makes it even more clear because I didn't think about this before. Even more now is Plan 9 a terrible movie.
And Ed Wood
And
still
just
doesn't
keep on coming. Yeah.
We just every once
Shame
in a
on
while
you, Ed Wood.
we stroll down to the corner and spit on Ed Wood's grave just to make it worse.
every fourth classic movie salon.
Exactly.
You suck even more now, Ed Wood.
Thank goodness he made it. It is our eternal yardstick of badness.
and that it still exists, because I imagine there are far worse out there that no one knows about, and maybe that's for the best.
Oh no! Please don't let us cover it on Classic Movie Salon ever.
We won't. Because next week we're doing Sunset Boulevard.
Yay!
Who doesn't like a monkey? Which is
monkey funeral.
Before we wrap, I've got to make a distinguished mention that Jill mentioned. She said, must praise Robert Morley for his performance as Katharine Hepburn's brother. People always forget to mention him.
He was wonderful.
He was fantastic.
Yeah, a short screen role, but short presence on screen in this movie, but terrific because he's flustered. It's a great frantic kind of character and
good,
he did it
perfectly on both ends, because I think it's really easy to make that kind of cookie cutter. And he was not a cookie cutter actor, playing the good guy or the bad guy.
He was a cookie eating actor.
It was a cookie eating actor.
Clearly,
a little bit.
That was
just
also
a little bit.
That was in his contract. Must have cookies.
Katharine Hepburn had her own personal loo, and she had cookies. Okay.
Yeah, and the all the stuff with Robert Morley was shot on, I believe, on a soundstage.
Probably in England. He didn't.
Yeah. I don't think he left. I believe that's the way it
was. He was fantastic, though. It was a short role, but it was so integral to the movie because that was actually the basis for everything. So
because they're both so eccentric in their way. With this evangelical missionary type role that they're playing. So, it sets up all the polarity in the characters. Set these people coming together.
And that opening,
and it may be
the opening sequence where everyone's singing and they're singing and everyone else is just kind of like, I have no idea what they're saying. This cacophony of whatever.
Exactly. We'll just go with it. They're providing something, and it made me think about again the whole thing. Though this is not what this movie was about specifically. Right. In that beginning, made me think of the whole God and guns method of colonialization and control. That the 3 Gs: God, guns, and germs. That's the the whole method of colonialization. And so regardless of whether or not the native people know what you're saying or know what you're doing, they're just kind of going along with it. So and another scene that was really interesting was when Bogart came off of the African Queen, and then he flicked that his cigar, and everybody was after that cigar to the point of leaving church to engage with that cigar. That was a really interesting scene.
I agree, and I think the thing about that, both with the singing scene, well, it's all pretty much the same sequence, but you can't get extras to not be camera conscious. Like everyone there were totally being themselves. No one, I think, had any idea the concept of acting and camera and exactly what was going on, because the vibe of everybody you saw on camera was real. It didn't feel like they were acting. Like it really felt like, and it's like, if you have to have a bunch of extras act, most of the time it's bad, or it's too big, or it's not, because they're extras. Not all extras, don't email me. But
Joe Wilson at
yeah, exactly.
And also to excuse extras, speaking of somebody who's worked as an extra, a lot of the time it's because they're not giving in any direction. They're rushed onto set, shoved in position by a little jumped up 3AD who thinks is God, and not told anything. So extras really get a tough time being on set.
No, I agree, and I've done some extra work, and it made me not want to do it again. Extra work in LA is just you just watch the kind of like tribal thing build within the extra party, and the some people are convinced that they're walking off of that shoot with a career. They're convinced.
No. No.
Like someone's just gonna go pluck, and oh my God, where have you been?
There
The
you
way
go.
you walked behind the main actors, I knew. Yeah, no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of tribal things, did I tell you about my Planet of the Apes extra experience on another movie?
No.
Bombs away.
I've mentioned the Planet of the Apes story before. One of the extras in the Planet of the Apes, the Charlton Heston version, just happened to be a postgrad psychology researcher at I think at Berkeley. And he noticed that this bizarre thing that during the tea breaks, the different ape species would sit together and have their breaks together. So the orangutans would be together, the chimps would be together, the gorillas would be together. And this is in America in the 1960s. And underneath that makeup, of course, they were a mixture of black, white, Hispanic, etc. And normally they would sit in their separate racial groups, but they were looking at each other with face value. And I noticed the same thing on A Testament of Youth, in which I was the technical advisor, that during the breaks, the extras will be sitting in their tribal groups. So the people dressed as soldiers will be sitting together, the nurses will be sitting together, the doctors will be sitting together, even though, of course, these people are just extras. They've got no relevance to these jobs at all. They're just a set of clothes. So it is a really bizarre thing, the tribalism of extras, that all they do is they see someone they identify with, and they're my friend, even though they've got nothing in common with them whatsoever, apart from the fact that their clothing number in the back of their clothing is one different from the person sitting next to them.
Because we're all just bags of chemicals.
Yes.
Bags of chemicals looking for some kind of identity.
I just realized I have movie posters. Well, it's not going to show up for this week's movie and next week's movie.
Oh, look at that!
Oh.
Nicely done. Cool posters.
Isn't that extraordinary?
And in order.
How did you manage that?
In order, just a coincidence, but yeah, African.
Nothing is coincidence, my dear.
No, it's true. You're right. And Sunset Boulevard. So go figure. I just don't. I see them. I'm looking, and I'm like, I forgot.
Very cool. So next week, if you haven't seen Sunset Boulevard, it's on Netflix streaming. I believe it's also streaming in the UK on the Netflix. But it's a classic movie. There's been a billion pop culture references to it for decades, and it is like no other. It's very Los Angeles.
Yes.
Very Los Angeles.
Only the pictures got small.
Exactly. It is yet the end of another era in another movie. So we will be back next week looking at Sunset Boulevard, join us, watch the movie before, otherwise we're just going to spoil it. Colleen, Tachi, Matthew, thanks for hanging out.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Cheers.
Bye. And thanks,
Ciao.
Matt, Marilyn Gale, for hanging out with us here live. Very cool. Bye.